life. Maybe a colleague, maybe someone you once dated, maybe someone you've known for years, who has never once raised their voice in you, never rushed, never explained themselves too much, never seemed to need anything from the room. And you have spent more time thinking about that person than about almost anyone else. You've tried to understand what it is, their confidence, maybe, their stillness, the way they seem to already know the answer to a question you haven't finished asking. What you were sensing was not a personality trait, it was a system, an internal algorithm that most people don't know exists, and even fewer know how to build. This is what that algorithm looks like. In 1995, a neurologist named Antonio Damasio published research that would quietly overturn a century of assumptions about rational thought. He found that patients with damage to the emotional processing regions of the brain, people who could still reason perfectly, still solve problems, still speak intelligently, were completely unable to make decisions. Not because they couldn't think, because they couldn't feel. What Damasio discovered was that emotion is not the enemy of rational thought. It is the infrastructure of it. The people you perceive as most calm, most controlled, most psychologically present are feeling less. They are processing faster. And there's a difference that changes everything. Here is the part most people miss. Emotional control is not emotional suppression. The person who suppresses their emotions is still being controlled by them. They've simply moved the conflict inside, where it runs constantly, quietly, at a cost no one can see from the outside. But the person who has learned to observe their emotional state rather than become it, they are operating from a different position entirely. Think of it this way. When something unexpected happens, a conflict, a rejection, an insult, a loss, most people experience a lag. A moment where the emotional system takes over the cognitive one. The heart rate spikes. The thinking narrows. The response that comes out is not chosen. It arrives. The emotionally controlled person has the same spike, the same biological event. But between the event and the response, they have built something most people have never tried to build. A pause, not the performance of calm, not the absence of feeling. A pause. And in that pause, everything is different. There is a particular kind of intelligence that has no official name. It isn't IQ. It isn't even what most people call emotional intelligence. That term has been packaged and sold into something almost unrecognizable. Call it social perception, the ability to read a room before the room has spoken. Watch what happens in any group situation when tension enters. Most people respond to the tension itself. They either try to resolve it, escalate it, or disappear from it. The perceptive person is watching something else entirely. They're watching who looks at whom in the first 3 seconds. They're watching whose breathing changes. They're watching the person who laughs just slightly too quickly. The one who refills their glass without being thirsty. The one who changes the subject with just a fraction too much energy. None of this is performance. None of this is calculation. The room is telling them the truth about everyone in it, involuntarily, continuously, in a language that only looks like silence. The same perceptive person reads something else that most people miss. The gap between what someone says and the energy underneath it. You've experienced this. Someone tells you they're fine, and you know they're not. Not because of what they said, because of the half second before they said it. Or someone agrees with you, enthusiastically, warmly, and something in you registers a faint note of wrongness, a frequency that doesn't match. This is not intuition in any mystical sense. This is your nervous system processing thousands of micro-signals simultaneously, micro-expressions that last less than a fifth of a second, subtle shifts in vocal resonance, changes in the rate and depth of breath, and delivering a conclusion before your conscious mind has had time to form a question. The emotionally intelligent person has learned to trust that delivery, not blindly, but enough to pause before they commit to something that their body has already quietly declined. Emotional reactivity has a specific social cost that almost no one calculates in real time. Every time you react visibly to a provocation, every time someone sees exactly how to get a rise out of you, you hand them a map of your interior, of where your edges are, of what matters to you and how much. This isn't theoretical. Think of the person who knows exactly which subject makes you defensive, exactly which kind of criticism makes you over-explain, exactly where to press to produce a reaction. How did they learn that? Well, you taught them, not in words, in responses. Every unmanaged reaction is a lesson in how to manage you. But suppression is not the answer to reactivity. The person who suppresses, who sits in meetings showing nothing, who absorbs conflict without expression, who performs equanimity, is carrying a specific physiological load that compounds over time. The research is straightforward here. Chronically suppressed emotion does not disappear. It relocates into cortisol levels, into disrupted sleep architecture, into the dull, sourceless irritability of someone who has spent too long being fine with their work. Suppression is not control. It is dead. The interest accrues. And eventually, in the wrong moment with the wrong person, it collects. So if reactivity is a map given away freely, and suppression is deadly compounds, what is the alternative? The pause is not a technique. It's a capacity. And like all capacities, it is built through repetition in conditions of difficulty. Here is what it actually looks like in practice. Something happens. Something that would, in the past, have produced an immediate response. The emotionally controlled person does not pretend they feel nothing. They feel it. They register it precisely. The tightening, the heat, the pull toward a particular action. And then they make one choice that most people do not make. They do not act on the feeling. They act on the observation of the feeling. There is a space between those two things that is almost invisible at first. But it grows. With practice, it grows. Until the space is large enough to contain not just the emotion, but a decision about what to do with it. You've seen this person. Someone says something pointed in a meeting. A comment designed to diminish, or to establish territory, or to test the room's response. Most people react immediately, some with defensiveness, some with false laughter, some with the kind of over-agreement that signals discomfort more clearly than a direct objection would. The person with the developed pause does something different. They let it land. They don't rush to respond. They don't rush to soften the moment. They simply receive it, visibly, calmly, and then, when they speak from a position that is not defensive, not aggressive, but precisely chosen. Sometimes they say nothing at all, and the nothing they say carries more weight than anything the reactive person managed, because silence, in that moment, is not absence. It is presence, deliberate, controlled, unafraid. emotional brains, the amygdala fires its alarm signal. The prefrontal cortex has approximately 90 seconds before the neurochemical surge begins to naturally dissipate. 90 seconds. If you cannot act for 90 seconds, not suppress, not perform calm, just not act, the intensity of the initial response begins to decrease on its own. The window is 90 seconds. Most people don't know this, and so they make their most important decisions in the first 10. There is something that happens in a room when someone with genuine psychological presence enters it. It is not charisma. It is not status or beauty or volume. It is something more fundamental. The sense that this person is entirely here, not planning their next sentence, not calculating how they're being perceived, not managing the impression they're creating, just here, receiving the room, observing it, present to it. This quality, which looks like stillness from the outside, is actually the result of a very active internal process. The person who is most present in a room is the one who is most actively processing it, not the one performing for it. Here is the paradox that sits at the center of everything we've discussed. The more you need people to perceive you correctly, the less clearly they perceive you. The more you need the room's approval, the less authority you carry in it. The more you explain, justify, soften, and qualify, the less believable you become. And the person who has genuinely stopped needing, the one who states their position and goes quiet, who receives criticism without collapsing, who disagrees without needing to win, who can sit in silence without filling it, that person becomes almost incomprehensibly attractive to the people around them, not because they're performing detachment, because they've stopped performing entirely. Everything we have covered in this video, the pause, the presence, the social perception, the silence, none of it is about becoming someone different. It is about removing what was never yours to carry. The need to be understood immediately. The need for the room to receive you correctly. The need to justify your decisions to people who did not ask. The need to never be misread. The need for the reaction to match what you intended. These needs are not character traits. They are adaptations, learned in specific conditions for specific reasons that probably made complete sense at the time, but they are extraordinarily expensive in the life you're living now. Every over-explanation is a cost. Every rushed agreement is a cost. Every emotion managed by performing its absence is a cost. And the person who has stopped paying those costs, not because they became hard or cold or indifferent, but because they genuinely arrived at the understanding that their interior does not require external validation to be real. That person is living at a frequency that most people only glimpse in moments they can't quite explain. The moment you felt calmer than you expected to in a crisis. The moment you said less and it landed harder. The moment you didn't defend yourself. And somehow that was more powerful than anything a defense could have been. You already know what this frequency feels like. The question is only whether you're willing to live there. This is not something you read about and have. It is something built quietly in ordinary moments when no one is watching. In the moment you feel the pull to over-explain, and you don't. In the moment you feel the urge to fill the silence, and you sit with it instead. In the moment someone challenges you and the old response rises, and you pause. 90 seconds. Let the chemistry settle, and then choose. That choice, repeated, becomes something. Not a mask, not a performance, a way of being that doesn't need an audience to be real. The most emotionally controlled person you know is not controlling their emotions. They are no longer at war with them. They have learned to be curious about what that feels, instead of afraid of it, to observe the internal weather without becoming the storm. To know that their response to this moment is the only thing in this moment that is actually theirs. Everything else, the reaction of the room, the behavior of other people, the outcome of a situation is beyond the boundary of the self. And they have learned with time to live inside that boundary with something that is neither contentment nor resignation, but clarity. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind you only notice when you look back at a moment you handled differently than you once would have. And understand, without pride or performance, that something has changed. You don't become this person in a moment. You become them in 1,000 moments.